and welcome everybody. And thank you for joining us today. My name is Miles Hansen. I'm the president and CEO of World Trade Center Utah, and welcome to our first session of our virtual trade mission to Israel. So welcome to everybody who's joining us on Zoom right now, everybody who's watching live on YouTube, and the many people who will watch a recording of this session after the fact. We are so excited for the virtual trade mission. We have 6 seminars over the next 3 days. And at the very top, I'd like to recognize Courtney Ray with the World Trade Center Utah team, who's been working very closely with Dr. Hillel Newman and his team at the Consulate General in LA for all of the work that they've put in to prepare these various sessions. Also would like to recognize and thank Franz Kolb with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, who also has been integral in putting together this virtual trade mission. Franz has been on many real trade missions to Israel over the past few years. And so having his expertise to help us shape the program has been invaluable. I'd also like to thank our partners. Of course, the Consulate General of Israel in Los Angeles, the Utah-Israel Economic Council, Ron Zamir and Tom Jacobson are with us this morning. We're very, very grateful to them for all that they do to build and strengthen ties between Utah and Israel on a regular basis. And then, of course, I mentioned Franz with the Governor's Office of Economic Development. Before jumping into today's session, I thought it'd be helpful to provide just a quick overview of why Israel. Of course, the United States and Israel have a very strong special relationship. This is an alliance of unparalleled strength in the world. The United States and Israel for many decades have had this special relationship. And with that has come, the key relationships in many different areas, including trade and investment. It's interesting that the United States and Israel have had a free trade agreement in place since 1985. And since 1995, there are virtually no tariffs on any goods or services between the United States and Israel, other than a few agricultural products. And so we see that the U.S. and Israeli economies are very closely integrated, very strong relationships. And because of that, we see tremendous trade happening between the two countries, over 35 or $36 billion just in the past couple of years, and that number is continuing to grow. Of course, the United States is a large economy, does business around the world. Israel is an economy that punches way above its weight, and the United States is Israel's top trading partner. Also, as we think about many the similarities between Utah and Israel, there are many reasons why we have such a strong economic and trade investment relationship, why Ron and Tom and the others at the Utah-Israel Economic Council are so busy. If you think about Israel, you have a country that is a desert, an economy that is based in innovation. They live in a bit of a rough neighborhood, and they've been able to develop a very innovative, advanced economy in that part of the world. Utah also is in a desert, also had a history of growing and developing this economy, this prosperity out of difficult circumstances. And so you see that there are many similarities between Utah and Israel. And if the U.S.-Israeli relationship is very strong, that's even more true with the Utah-Israel relationship. And for me, I'm a little bit biased. I met my wife in Jerusalem. We were both students doing study abroad, and so I've traveled all over the country and had very many warm memories of being in Israel. And I look forward to the day when we can jump on airplanes and head back to Israel. And Dr. Newman, we look forward to hosting you back here in Utah sometime soon. Before jumping into today's program, I'd just like to remind everybody again that this is the first of 6 sessions over the next 3 days. At 9:45 a.m. this morning, we'll have a technology and innovation session. Tomorrow morning, we will have a defense and security session, as well as a water technology session. And then Wednesday morning, we'll do sessions on the life science and healthcare industry. And then we're going to have a roundtable of Utah business and government leaders talking about why Utah's economy is so strong to a group of Israeli companies. And then they'll do the same as we really try to shape that last roundtable discussion at 9:45 a.m. on Wednesday around next steps and taking action and how we can build out these relationships. If you haven't registered for all these sessions yet, for anything that's interesting to you, please go to WTCutah.com. There you'll find all the information. You can register for these other sessions. I've had conversations with all the other speakers, and Dr. Newman, thank you to you and your team. We have a phenomenal slate of speakers lined up, and we're very grateful for that. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and hand the baton to Mr. Franz Kolb from the Governor's Office of Economic Development. Franz will give some introductory remarks, at which point we'll jump straight into the program, and I'll introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Hillel Newman, who is the Consul General of Israel based in Los Angeles. So Franz, over to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Miles. We're very grateful for your introductory words. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to congratulate the World Trade Center for putting on this important seminar and seminars today. I'm grateful for Dr. Hillel Newman, who has been so instrumental in his commitment coming to Utah. Dr. Newman sent me his bio, and I need to tell you from a diplomatic standpoint that he was the ambassador of Israel to Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, so he has the rank of an ambassador. He's also a very accomplished lecturer. He has also published some books, and we are so grateful for his commitment to come here to share his experiences with us. And we want to thank everyone for the next 2 or 3 days that have worked so hard to teach us here in Utah and in various parts of the world as far as trade and with Israel and Utah. I wanted to tell you that I have been working for 5 governors, and with each of them I've had the opportunity to do an on-ground trade mission to Israel. And we want to, and we soon will have another new governor here in the state of Utah, and we hope that, and I'm certain that he will be going to Israel as well. Israel and Utah have had a long-standing relationship. I still remember being in Israel and meeting with Shimon Peres and with Prime Minister Netanyahu and our governor. And I remember the conversation went from one holy city to another holy city when we talked about Jerusalem. And Israel has been one of the, and specifically Jerusalem, one of the cities that you cannot forget. And I hope that everyone will, when we will go over there, will go with us and will do business with the great people of Israel. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted. I want to extend a welcome, and I want to tell our friends in Israel that Utah is committed to doing business with Israel, but not just business, as well, also education and cultural collaborations. I want to thank over the years the many friends of Utah in Israel that have been helping us. Not just Dov Raviv and Zev, the chamber, and many other people that will be participating, but those friendships are run deep. And I'm grateful for Dr. Hillel Newman, who now is carrying the flag of Israel in the southwestern United States, and who has been so grateful for to come up here. And I still remember in January when he was here at the opening session of our legislature, and we showed him around and how gracious he was. So I'm delighted to have Dr. Hillel Newman speak to us now. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. Thank you, Miles, for the introduction, and I'll turn it then over to you.
Great, thank you, Franz, very much for that. Before introducing Dr. Newman, just like to go over the program for everybody. So we'll have the chance to hear from Dr. Newman. He'll speak for about 20 to 25 minutes or so, provide the overview. And then the balance of the time, we want to have a discussion. And so many of you have submitted questions when you registered. Courtney Ray with the World Trade Center Utah team has those questions. She will lead off with those. As Dr. Newman is speaking, any other questions, please put them in the chat function. Use the Q&A tool here in Zoom. Courtney will be collecting those, and then she can go ahead and lead the discussion. And Franz, I just saw Dr. Newman dropped off off the screen. So hopefully he jumps back on, but if not, I'll go ahead and read his bio. And Franz, you know Dr. Newman very well, so if he doesn't jump back on the screen, we'll have you give his presentation in his stead.
What can I say? I will do my best now.
Yeah, that's right. So, but Hannah and Courtney, if you could maybe give him a quick call and see what we can do to get him back on screen. But I will go ahead and read through his bio. He has tremendous experience. And so I want to make sure that everybody has a full breadth of understanding of everything that he has been doing. And so Dr. Hillel Newman assumed the post of Consul General of Israel in July 2019, where he serves as the senior representative of the state of Israel to the Pacific Southwest. During his 20-year diplomatic service, Consul General Newman accumulated vast experience in policy formulation and decision-making at the highest levels of Israel's foreign policy establishment. He has served in several influential and critical positions, including policy advisor to 3 foreign ministers of Israel and ambassador of Israel to Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. Before he joined the diplomatic service, he attained a PhD in Jewish history and served as a professor of Jewish history, teaching graduate courses at Bar Ilan University and Boston University. He has authored and published a book on Jewish sectarianism during the Hellenistic and Roman period. For the past 5 years, he has also served as a key lecturer on Judaism in the NATO Defense College. Most recently, Consul General Newman served in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as both Special Policy Advisor to the Director General and as Director of the World Jewish Affairs Department. He has been intimately involved in the most current and pressing issues confronting global Jewry. Previously, Consul General Newman served as also in the strategic division of the ministry, playing a key role in coordinating efforts related to strategic threats facing the state of Israel. As ambassador to the republics of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, both Muslim countries, he promoted political, business, and security ties with these countries. He also initiated several projects and agreements in the fields of medicine, education, agriculture, and humanitarian aid. Consul General Newman first became familiar with the United States while serving as Deputy Consul General in Boston to the New England region between 2001 and 2005. He engaged in diverse public diplomacy efforts, conducted briefings on political and security issues, and took a special interest in building interfaith and inter-ethnic relations. Consul General Newman made Aliyah with his family from South Africa, served as a medic in the IDF, and is married to Aliyah. The couple have a 10-year-old son, Ram. His favorite hobbies are reading, nature tours, sporting events, and scuba diving. And Hillel, we got to get skiing and outdoor recreation on that list of favorite hobbies so we can get you out here to Utah a little more often. So, but thank you, Dr. Newman, for being with us today. It's great to see you on screen, and I'll go ahead and hand it over to you to take it from here.
Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure for me to join you guys in Utah. I've visited twice in my life in Utah. Once just as just after my military service, I did a tour from coast to coast, and I went through Utah, and it was a wonderful experience. And my second time was only about, a month or 2 ago. When was it? Before the corona, 3-4 months ago. And I really feel at home at Utah. So I just want to thank you all. I want to thank the governor's office, Franz Kolb, the World Trade Center of Utah, and the whole entire team, Miles and the team, Courtney and Hannah and Ray. Thank you all for all your assistance in pulling together to make this happen. I only hope we could host you in Israel on a real mission. But the days are difficult for that. So this is the first step. This is just a teaser in order for everyone who's watching to come and join and see Israel with their own eyes, the energy of Israel, when the time comes. I'd like to express my deep appreciation to all the spectators, all those who have joined us. I know there are a lot of competitive webinars and Zooms, and that you joined us. I'm appreciative of it, and I hope that it'll be of interest to you. I'll touch briefly on like a bird's eye view on a few issues. One is the business environment. Secondly is a little bit about the political environment, the industries and opportunities that we see going forward to the future. I'd just like to say that we have a special recognition of the importance of Utah and the great potential of the relations between Israel and Utah. And I'd like to say why. First of all, because of the leadership coming out of Utah, the governor and the entire state of deep friendship we feel with Utah. The people of Israel feel with the people of Utah. You know, I came to Utah, and you walk the streets and you see Zion Bank and Zion Park. And of course, one feels immediately at home. Besides that, we know that there's a deep interest in innovation, You call it the Silicon Slopes. So we're the startup nation. It goes well together. And we know that there's a deep interest in innovation and ingenuity. And we know of the low tax rates and the skilled labor and the excellent universities. I won't go into all the details. I'll just say that there is tremendous potential for our relationship. The second aspect which the President touched on, Miles, is the special environment between Israel and the United States, the excellent relations. And I think we all know, and all those that are watching this know, that the relations between US and Israel are not based on interests. They're not political interests. They're deep-seated values, an alliance, a strategic alliance which goes very deep and very far. This is a very special relationship when you talk about international politics and foreign affairs. And so there's a close, intimate relationship, which even if you just look at the most recent past now, in the fact that the Secretary of State visits Israel during the coronavirus in order to talk about issues on the table, we have a very deep-seated, value-oriented relationship. And that's the general environment within which Utah and Israel can develop their relationship. This relationship also has, of course, other aspects which are like defense cooperation, which has also its implications in Utah. That's more or less just an opening, and now we'll go into the session itself. Can we share the presentation? Great. I'd like to start off with from a zoom out, from a general picture, and then zoom into coronavirus and today's world. But if we look at the slide on the screen right now, you can see that the world is going through a tremendous transition. If you look at the year, if you look a decade and a half ago, from 2006 to 2016, and today it's even increasing, this trend is accelerating even further. Then if you look at a decade and a half ago, then the top companies in the world were energy companies. If you look at the top 10 companies, half, if not more, were all energy companies, natural, basic energy. If you look at the world today, the tables have changed completely. Only one energy company is on the top 10 list, and the rest are all connected to software, connected to the world as we know it today. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, China Mobile. These are the companies that are leading the world today. I heard also that Alibaba has also hit the top 10. So the world is going that direction. Let's move on to the next slide. We're going to move fast so that people don't get too bored. In this new business environment that we're talking about, first of all, I'll just mention that coronavirus accelerates it even further, and we'll talk about the implications of coronavirus in a minute or two. But Israel is in a unique position as the world goes forward towards innovation and ingenuity and moving from energy towards software. Israel is in a unique position. I'll start off with the why, which is at the bottom of the screen. Everyone asks, why did Israel become the startup nation or a global powerhouse in artificial intelligence, innovation, and ingenuity? And the top two answers are usually because Israel was never blessed with natural resources. So Israel had to base itself on the human power. The second aspect is that Israel always had a defense need from the establishment of the State of Israel. As was mentioned before, we landed up in one of the roughest neighborhoods. So we had to be on the cutting edge of technology all the time. And that forced Israel to be on the ball and innovate all the time. And the results are now moving up to the top of the screen that we're today the third in global innovation competitiveness, the second largest number of companies on the NASDAQ, the first by VC investment per capita. And according to different rankings, we're between the first and the third globally in the confidence of investors index. So we're really in a unique position to lead the future and to be part of the future, which is going in the direction of innovation. Let's move on. All the big companies just about have their R&D centers in Israel. Here are just a few examples. Let's move on. This is just a slide to show you the world, how Israel is taking its place in innovation. You can see here that Israel is actually third according to this index, which is the World Economic Forum. There are other indexes which put Israel first. Let's move on. Also in the R&D investment, as we mentioned before, here you see how Israel is leading the way. Let's move on. Now, how does this apply? This applies in all fields that one can think of. You know, in the past, they thought that innovation is like a specific application of some kind. Today, we know and we understand that innovation has the aspect of technology touches on every single field of life. And I just brought a few examples. I'll mention a few examples like smart mobility, precise agriculture, water technologies, defense systems, and even milk production. Let's move on. Smart mobility. You know, Israel was an absolute failure in the development of cars, in automobiles. And Israel developed a car which was called the Susita, which didn't get off the ground that much. But in today's world, Israel is leading the way in smart mobility because it's now, it all is on the foundation of sensors and innovation, ingenuity. And today you have companies like Mobileye, Waze, all these companies that you see on the screen and others, which Israel is now one of the leading partners. There are hundreds and thousands of companies, of Israeli companies, which are now leading the industry in new ways. Let's move on. Precision, you know, Israel is famous for the fact that in the beginning of Israel, it was oranges. Today, we're famous for the technology for growing different types of fruits and vegetables, and started off with irrigation systems, basic irrigation systems, but today it's developed much further. And today you have drones for agriculture, and you have precise precision agriculture, which you can do everything through the precise measured feeding of the soil. It's changing the entire agricultural scene, really. There's also genetic engineering, which Israel is involved in the field of fruits and vegetables. It's a whole new field today. Let's move on. Water recycling. Israel has also taken that, and we're the leaders in the world. We're 86% of water recycling, and I think that's also an issue we can discuss in the context of Utah. Let's move on. Israeli water plants. I brought this as another example of how water has other implications. For instance, peace. Regional peace. You know, water used to be an issue of contention in the Middle East, especially between Israel and Jordan and the Palestinian Authority. Today, we have solved the problem with desalination plants. We've set up the largest desalination plant in the world, really, and we serve the interests, and we give water today to Jordan and to the Palestinian Authority and to other factors. So water has been removed from the table as an issue of confrontation. By the way, in Los Angeles area, we have 2 desalination plants that Israel is involved in. One of them was put up by Israel, and one is run by Israel. Let's move on. Another example of how water can move in different directions is a new company, an Israeli company, manages to create water from the humidity in the air. So you can go to a desert-stricken area and put up this contraption, this device, and you create water. It's done miracles for people in Africa who live in areas with totally desolate and drought-stricken areas, and we create water for people in desert. This is just another application. Let's move on. Defense technologies, of course, is unending. This is a great potential also with Utah. You have the new cyber on the left side of the screen. You have a kind of a shot which tries to depict cyber security, which is a big growing field. The Iron Dome in the middle is just a good example of cooperation between the United States and Israel, which leads us in new cutting-edge technology directions. Let's move on. Just another example, if you think, what is the furthest thing from your mind where technology can help? This is the dairy production. And I'm using this because I was ambassador of Israel in Uzbekistan, and we assisted Uzbekistan in the improving of their dairy production. When I arrived there, each cow gave more or less 7-8 liters of milk, and we managed to increase the production of the dairy cows from 8 to 12, 14, which is more close to double. So it's all a matter of technology today. It's not just, growing a cow. There's a whole industry of how to grow a cow and in what conditions. So this is just an example of how the implications of technology reach in all directions. Let's move on. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19. We're all under the impact of COVID-19, and I wish all the spectators and observers here good health. Of course, the entire globe has been impacted, but what I can say from what is a general rule of what's happening in the business world is that there's no doubt that COVID-19 accelerates the trends that we spoke about before, which are moving the direction of artificial intelligence, high-tech, and innovation. Those are the fields which are going to be the kings of the future. Let's move on. Israel had a unique approach to COVID-19, which I think is part of its general outlook. And this also goes in a little bit into the political environment in Israel. First of all, we're the only country in the world that as a result of COVID-19, we set up an emergency national unity government, bringing together Netanyahu from the right and Gantz, who's regarded as center-left. Their pictures are on the screen. And they came together in an emergency unity government. It's like Republicans and Democrats coming together in order to address the urgent situation. This is very unique. I don't think there's any other country in the world that followed this line. And now we have one of the broadest based governments in the history of Israel, 73 members of parliament out of 120, a large, broad base, and they can address, and of course their number one issues are health and economy. Those are the two issues that are on the agenda of our cabinet. The second aspect, which was quite unique to Israel, was addressing the COVID-19 as a national security issue. So, we're used to difficult situations, and very quickly Israel set up a one-centered command center, a national command center, where all apparatuses of the government were brought in, including diplomats and including security bodies, and everyone was brought in order to address the issue. Part of it was also I, as a diplomat, was given missions to do here in the consulate here in Los Angeles, including procurement for Israel in different fields, taking care of different issues that needed to be taken care of, rescuing stranded Israelis, all kinds of things. So we were all given directives which came out of this National Security Command Center. The third aspect, which was quite unique to Israel, other countries are following now, is the high-tech approach. From the beginning, Israel set up incubators with mixed multidisciplinary teams. Many such incubators were set up, and that was one of the facilitators for moving fast from procurement and purchasing to self-production. In very quick time, Israel started self-producing more than enough for their needs and started even to give to others, export and give to others. The last aspect which I mentioned, which was quite unique to Israel, was the connection between the IDF and civic needs. And very quickly, military installations were transformed to serve civic purposes. Factories that manufactured tanks all of a sudden started manufacturing PPEs and all kinds of 3D dimension devices, printing, and that also managed to change the situation of Israel. Let's move forward. So if you look forward into the future, the impacts of COVID-19. So if you talk about, some people talk about dramatic scenarios, doomsday scenarios, the collapse of the geopolitical world order. So I don't think we should exaggerate. That's not the case. But there will be significant shifts in the economic order. In the short term, as people get more freedom, which doesn't look like it's happening right now, but we hope in the near future, there will be an upbeat in consumer demand. But that will not be the dramatic shift. The dramatic shift will come with the long term. And in the long term, we will see quite a significant shift from globalization to nation-state economies. Things will become more localized. There will also be a dramatic shift from in-person services to online automation and digitalization services. We'll see very soon in what way this expresses itself in the actual business world. We'll also see a shift from global supply chains to local production and delivery. And that has a lot of implications in the local market and how to build or structure one's local economy. And there will also be a shift to self-reliance. As part of the breaking up of this globalization, we'll also see a tendency towards self-reliance. Let's move on. So if we look, how does this translate itself into the business world? If we think of how, also if we think, what are the future directions? I know that many people are unemployed and many people lost their jobs because of COVID-19. And if we look, okay, what are the directions of the future? Then I've tried to condense the directions of the future on this slide. And there's no doubt that the future is artificial intelligence, high tech and innovation, mainly remote technologies, tele-everything, automation, robotics, all these fields. We talk about what are the fields of the future. Look at the streaming services like Netflix, Amazon, where many people are suffering and they are on the rise because that is the future. Digitalization, automation and robotics, streaming services, that's the future. There, as a result of that, also all cyber systems and cyber security. That's a large part of the future. Touchless devices. Israel is working on many new devices which will be touchless. This is also an aspect of the new world. Food and energy security. As we mentioned before, self-reliance, the breaking up of global chains. This also means that we all have to think about our supply lines and our self-reliance, how we can produce ourselves. Biotech is an issue of the future, local production, but it's not only production, it's also supplies and deliveries. Educational platforms. That is also an issue. Of course, we talk about whether schools will open or they won't open. There's no doubt that all these educational platforms which can be served on the internet and through the cyber systems, that's the future. And fintech has also taken a surprise rise. It's one of the fields that Israel has quadrupled in. So we're talking, that's also a future item. Let's move on. Now I'm going to give a few examples of applied Israeli innovation in these fields. I'm mentioning this also as ideas for where we can cooperate, where perhaps businesses in Utah can think, okay, this is a direction that I can take with Israel. For instance, remote assessment and examination. So we have a few companies, I've written the names here. These are Israeli companies. In the brackets, you have Israeli companies that are focusing on these fields. Automation of PCR testing, robots in the service of vital signs reading and treatment, 3D human body vision, thermal cameras, saliva diagnosis, scent trackers, voice detection, smart glasses. These are all things which are worthwhile looking at, and you have the names of the companies. Ultrasonic data transmission, communication, connectivity, touchless delivery and devices, education platforms, as I mentioned, contact tracing, affordable medical devices and PPEs, all enhanced hands purification system. Artificial intelligence enhanced hands purification system. These are all suggested topics or fields to look at. Let's move on. Let's just, if we have, I think we have only 4 or 5 minutes left. So I'll just like to give one example. If you can open the 4th link there, just to give an example of an applied science of some kind. Okay, that was just to make sure that no one's sleeping. We're coming to the end. I just want to, I think we need to, yeah, thanks. So we're coming to the end. In summary, of course, in normal times, you'd be walking the streets of Tel Aviv and Eilat, and I hope that the time will come when we will do that. This is just to give a taste of the different directions in which we can go in the future. There's tremendous potential in the relations between Israel and Utah. Especially, I see the space of Utah and the low tax and the high growth of Utah and the interest in innovation and startup environment. So I see tremendous potential in the relationship, such a friendly relationship coming down from the governor's office, and to the entire team. So there is tremendous potential, and I encourage everyone to think of in what way they can develop trade or cooperation, business cooperation, even the setting up of businesses, whether it be in Israel or in Utah. Israeli companies in Utah, there is a great interest. I know that Israeli companies are looking for centers. You know, we're in difficult times because of COVID-19. So no one is expanding right now, but we will get over COVID-19. And Utah is a wonderful place for Israeli companies to settle as well. There's also a wonderful experience with Israeli companies that have already succeeded in Utah. Lastly, if everyone is looking to look into more in-depth knowledge of the topics we discussed, I'd like to recommend 4 sources. One is the Startup Nation Central. It's a site which is set up, which touches on everything that's related to the startup nation of Israel. There's also another, if those who are specifically focused on the coronavirus implications, I suggest and recommend that you look at coronatech.org.il. There's also, you should also look at Our Crowd, an Israeli fundraiser, which raises funds for all kinds of innovation projects. They've just declared on a very large fund for innovation in the field of the pandemic. And there's also a book that has come out recently by Jody Cohen called Tikkun Olam, Israel versus COVID-19, for those who are interested in further information. That was just an attempt to give a bird's eye view of the different issues, and I'll be very glad to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Newman. That was an incredible presentation. I have so many questions from that. So let's get started because there's so much to review. You touched on a lot of different issues. One of the things that struck me is I wanted to talk about food security, if we could briefly. Excuse me, when you were talking about precision agriculture, one of our companies that we work with frequently is called Grove, and they have a technology that allows you to grow agriculture with very little water. So it's been a very popular company in Saudi Arabia and UAE, for example. And as you look at food security, and we have companies like that in Utah, what is the best way for a company like that to collaborate with Israel? How do we go about working with partnerships in Israel? Are there certain contacts that we should work with, or as you look at, one of the trends you talked about is more self-reliance, but we have such a great relationship with Israel. So I guess this is a 2-part question, which is, do you turn away from other countries in terms of more self-reliance when it comes to food security, or would you embrace a company like Grove and say, how can we work together to do this, to partner?
Well, we definitely embrace. Although we keep social distancing, we embrace. We work, international cooperation is one of our top items on the agenda. Just recently, we signed deals with the UAE. I don't know if you're following it, but we have interesting deals coming through in the international market. And we just signed a cooperation with UAE, and we work with India a lot. Now, in the field of precise agriculture and irrigation, Israel set up the pioneer companies in this field, and many of them were sold to India, but we still hold the R&D and a lot of the distribution aspects. So there are very important companies in this field which were set up originally by Israel, but the R&D continues in Israel. I'd like to recommend for those who are looking in this field, first of all, I'd like to recognize we also have partners on this in this virtual trade mission. One of them is the Export Institute, the Israeli Export Institute. They are a very good address for those who are looking for specific business ties in specific fields like agriculture. We can easily, through the Consulate General in Los Angeles, we're responsible for Utah as well. We'd be glad to connect anyone. They can send us an email or a contact, or they can directly make contact with the Export Institute in Israel. Their task is to find the appropriate partner. There's also another body which is a partner, more or less a partner in this virtual trade mission, which is the Federation of Israeli Chambers of Commerce. And they also have their contacts. But mainly, I would say, you can always start with us, or you can start with the Export Institute in Israel, and they will locate the partners. That is their job. So we will be glad to facilitate such contacts. I know that their agriculture and irrigation is also a big issue in Utah. I'd like to mention another thing that can be developed between Utah and Israel is also we had a problem with the Dead Sea, which was very salty. And we managed to transform it into a real business, manufacturing minerals and manufacturing what is needed in different applications, whether it's human minerals, treatment for the body and other things. I know that in Salt Lake City you have a salt lake. So we have other fields that we can work with, whether it be desalination and the purifying of water and taking the minerals out of water, out of salty water. There are different things in the field of water technologies as well. Water technology is very developed here in California, the context between Israel and California. We can also expand it to Utah and make sure that water is, that there's no water shortage, try and solve problems that you may have. So we'll be glad to learn from Utah what your issues are and what we can learn from you, and we can perhaps share what we know in these fields. Irrigation is one of the top industries developed by Israel, definitely.
Great. Yeah, so another company named Eden Technologies came to mind that's also working with other parts of the Middle East and on desalination. I thought that'd be a very interesting connection as well. One of the things that struck me is obviously Israel's known for its innovation, and we have a lot of great inventions, if you will, in Utah, but there's a difference between inventions and ideas and then innovation, which is really bringing things to market. And I think obviously Israel excels in that. What do you think, aside from the two main issues you mentioned up front in terms of your lack of natural resources and that aspect of your history, what do you think it is that allows so many of your companies to get to market so quickly? I mean, is it that your government backs away from bureaucracy, but yet you have so many safety measures in place? So what is it that allows so many of your companies to be able to be innovative and come to market with so little risk?
I think that Israelis are very practically orientated. When they have an idea, they immediately look at the practical implications of their idea. They're very, down to the ground, on the earth type of people. So they try to find the practical implications of every great idea in the air has to be brought down to earth. So I think that Israelis have that unique, I don't know what to call it, fluidity or vigilance, whatever you might want to call it, due to circumstances, due to their upbringing, due to fluid situation in the country. So they also have a bit of a pushy attitude or chutzpah. This the word chutzpah. I was talking the other day with two directors of movies. One is actually a music producer and a movie director. Here they're both Israeli, and they're in Los Angeles, and we had a discussion. And I asked them, how do you explain the fact that Israelis are penetrating so far and deep into the Hollywood industries? I mean, we have series and Netflix and whatever. And their answer was that you need a special attitude. It's a bit of a pushy attitude, but you need a bit of a push. And the Israelis have that. Sometimes it comes across as a bit arrogant, but they're not arrogant. They're just very straightforward. They don't play games. So I think that's also part of it. Once you have a great idea, you have to bring it down to reality. You watch Shark Tank, and you see how things have to be brought down to reality in order to work. I think that we also, if someone has a great idea, if you need assistance of some kind, I don't know how we can set that up, but we can connect with Israeli entrepreneurs, those who have gone through the process already, and we can give advice. We'll be glad to set up such a system, perhaps, for Utahns who have good ideas and they want advice we'll be glad to try and set up a system where they can speak to experienced entrepreneurs who have already done the mileage and gone through the process.
I love it. That's great. Thank you. When I spoke with a healthcare specialist recently, they were saying that at least in Utah, a lot of the medical community had gone pretty much 90% of their healthcare had gone online or telemedicine. But they said that they were really finding from the feedback that once things got back to normal or the new normal, that they said that only 50% they really found was helpful. And that, like cardiologists, for example, really needed to see patients. But so much of what you all have focused on is telemedicine and all the robotics and everything surrounding healthcare and sending your military, equipment and everything into this civilian world. And it seems like you're so far ahead of everyone with that. Is your opinion the same, that only 50%, if we, hopefully get back to a new normal, that really only 50% of the community would really be more telemedicine? Or do you think that with this new COVID world that you would be able to maintain a higher percentage online or with telemedicine?
I think it's difficult to give an exact percentage, but I think that there is no doubt that telemedicine will remain with us. It's not something that's going to pass. I think that, we're talking via Zoom. Do you think that Zoom will disappear once COVID-19 disappears? No, it's a part of our reality now. People will do things through Zoom. It's become part of our nature. So also, if we can decrease the burden on doctors and nurses by doing things remotely, and now we're finding out how we can do many of the functions can be done remotely. There's no need for the person to come into the clinic and to sit in line and to see the doctor. Many things can be done remotely. Perhaps if we can go back to the presentation. Is she still there to to take us back to if they share the presentation? I'd like to show you. Thanks. Let's move back one or two. No, missed. Okay. There was I just wanted to show you a device. Oh, great. Okay. Move on to the end, towards the end. To the videos. Yeah, thanks. Just show, if you can, the last one, Temi. Is it working? Okay, the music's not working. Okay, as you can see, the sound is not working, so I'll be the sound. I'm not good at music, but you can see here a robot which is giving services to people, which decreases the issue of connection of touching between people. It decreases the probability of catching diseases. So Temi is one example of personal robots, which is part of the future. Now you have a whole list of devices which are being developed in remote technology and remote medicine, like the robotics diagnostics, which will certainly take a great part in the future. Whether it be 50%, I'm not sure, but it'll be a high percentage. I think if anybody can, if someone can get out of going to the doctor and sitting in line and do it from the house, they'll prefer to do it. Most people would prefer to do that. So now we have the technology, we have the ability, so it will take over our lives in a big way.
Right, that's true. I have a question from one of the cannabis companies here. They said Israel is leading the world in cannabis research. Can you expand on what is happening in cannabis trade and on any knowledge you have on innovation discoveries associated with these products?
Sure. A very senior person in our political scene who went into the cannabis is, of course, our former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who came from the Labour Party. And when he finished his service as Prime Minister, then he became one of the figureheads in the cannabis development in Israel. Cannabis is they're allowed to develop the know-how for the growing of cannabis for health reasons. So this has become a big field in Israel. We have a lot of, it goes from the genetics of how to grow it and to the actual precise technology on how to grow. And we see it as a legitimate thing of the future in the treatment of human beings. Of course, it's not for addiction, it's for health reasons. So I think that this is an important element. It has a tremendous amount of finance involved here. Profit, of course, is very great. So there is tremendous potential in this field, and many people are orbiting around cannabis and will land in some way or another in the field of cannabis. Already some countries and states, even the United States, allow it. Israel does not allow commercial use of cannabis for any other reason except health reasons. But I'm not sure exactly where your question lies, but it is an issue of the future, and Israel is involved in it. We're not a leading factor. There are some countries that have already had allowed the use of cannabis a long time ago, even for commercial use, and not health, commercial use. We don't. We only allow it for health reasons.
I think that probably answers their question. Another company, Dynapack Rotating, asked about tariffs when you're selling goods into Israel. I mean, that might vary based on industries and whatnot, so it might be a little vague. But can you talk about tariffs, and is there a website we can go to that's maybe based on each industry? So
yeah, of course, I cannot tell you the tariffs for each piece of merchandise and section, but of course, one can go into different sites in order to examine this issue. First of all, as I said before, the Export Institute of Israel has information about this. You can also go into the Ministry of Finance and Treasury of Israel, where they have sites which are devoted to the issues of customs and tariffs. We can also, if somebody has a specific question on a specific item, they're invited to make contact with us in the Consulate General of Israel in Los Angeles. I'll mention our email. We have an email which is called info, very simple, info@la.mfa.gov.il. That is a general information question that anyone can pose to the Consulate General of Israel. We will answer. So once we have a focus question on a specific item, if somebody wants to know the tariffs for that item, we will check and get back to that person.
Thank you. We had another company called Pure Earth, and they wanted to talk about, they wanted to see if you could talk about the Ministry of Environmental Protection and a bit about contaminated property reuse. Does that mean anything to you?
Wow. Well, I'm not an expert on that. What I can say is that we have a Ministry of Environment, Protection of Environment, or Quality of Environment. It's very active. It has teeth. Many of the factories that were contaminating different plants that were polluting, they were taken to court. They were sued. They were brought to justice, as one would say. Many things have changed because of that. Many rivers that were polluted have now been cleaned and purified in Israel. So there is a lot of awareness to this issue. Israelis, with all their down to the earth and all that, a part of it is also a high awareness and alert to health issues, at least to environment issues. They care about the quality of water. They care about the pollution and things like that, which is actually surprising, because when you have many things on your table, then you would think that some issues would have like a minor interest, but no, there's a very high priority given to these issues. So we have a very active Ministry of Environment, of Protection of Environment. We have many NGOs very active in this field. And so there's a lot of activity going on in this field in Israel, whether it be on the government level or the NGO level. I myself lived in a neighborhood in Israel where one of the rivers was polluted. A river that came very close to my home was polluted, and throughout my childhood, when I grew up, I was crying about this, that this river contaminated and went right into the sea. And lo and behold, when I reached my late teenagers, then someone sued the company, and the sue went to the high courts in Israel, and this company was forced to clean up the river. And it's changed the entire, it's now become a nature reserve. So these issues are on high priority in Israel, and they have teeth.
Great. Well, I will tell you, for those of you who have other questions, there were so many things that Dr. Hillel Newman spoke of, you know, with cybersecurity, water, aerospace, et cetera. We have so many upcoming sessions that will focus on those. So I tried to ask questions that were surrounding some of the other issues that might not be covered in our breakout sessions, but we look forward to all of you hopefully joining those sessions if those particular other issues are of interest to you. So please sign up and register for those. And Dr. Newman, that was so helpful and informative, and we're so grateful. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to the rest of the sessions.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Newman. Thank you, Courtney. Just a reminder to everybody, we will reconvene at 9:45 a.m. And Adib Baruch will be our speaker in the next session on technology and innovation. I had a chance to talk to Adib late last week. And just so to be honest, I'd seen his name and his current title. As I talked to him, I realized Adib is one of the pioneers of Israel's tech industry. He's the founder of Nest Technologies, the global IT company, former president of Niotron, a global cybersecurity company. He's currently the chairman of the Jerusalem Technology Investments, the largest fund of funds in Israel. Phenomenal guy, great resource. He is keyed up to present to us and help us understand a little bit how he and many others made Israel startup nation. And then also he wants to plug and support Utah companies. And so please, if you haven't registered yet, if you have time this morning, go ahead to our website and get registered, because this is going to be a phenomenal opportunity to connect with somebody who has been there building up Israel's tech and innovation ecosystem for the past 3 decades. And then also the rest of the sessions as well. Finally, minor housekeeping, you will receive an email with a link with all the other sessions, as well as a link to a survey. Please take a second, click that link, provide your feedback. We want to make sure that we set these up and calibrate these events and virtual trade missions in a way that will be most beneficial to you. So again, thank you to our speakers. Thank you, Dr. Newman. Thank you for everyone for participating. And we will reconvene here in just 15 minutes. So thank you. See you soon.